This is a U.S.-China media brief produced by the UCLA Asian American Studies Center. The U.S.-China media brief features interviews with experts and other prominent individuals involved in studying and documenting the dynamic and ever-evolving relationship between the United States of America and the People's Republic of China. I'm Russell Leong, Director of the U.S.-China Media Brief of the UCLA Asian American Studies Center. Our purpose is to provide a more balanced view of U.S.-China relations for the U.S. media through our media brief and website. Today we're very happy to have Professor Ling-chi Wang, a leading scholar of Asian American Studies, of the overseas Chinese, and of the Chinese diaspora, and a frequent speaker in the U.S., China, and Southeast Asia on Sino-U.S. topics ranging from politics to education. Professor Wang is an emeritus scholar at the University of California, Berkeley, and is a member of the U.S.-China Media Brief Experts. Now, Chinese Americans, there is a, sort of elite class, scientists, technical people, professionals, CEOs. There are some Chinese Americans in these positions. But I'm wondering what role ordinary Chinese Americans can play, say, the next 4 years to kind of influence U.S.-China relations in terms of political, economic, or cultural issues. Chinese Americans, after all, are not as powerful, say, as the Israeli lobby in getting their views across and influencing the mass media. What can, Chinese Americans in general kind of do?
I think that, up until recently, Chinese Americans have been largely, marginalized and ignored in terms of their views about China. And, we actually tended to be much more the unsuspecting and unwilling victims of, U.S. domestic and foreign policies. Every time there's a crisis between the United States and China, we were on the receiving end of all the negative things that happened. From boycotting Chinese restaurants in this country, to holding up Chinese Americans as a hostage to exchange for American imprisoned in China. All these things are really totally irrational. So I think that the most important thing that ordinary Chinese Americans should do is, in fact, to participate actively in politics and to speak out every time some of these paranoid statements being put out there in the radio or mass media. I think we need to speak out, and forcefully, in fact, so that America will begin to understand better the relations between the United States and China. I think as important as that relationship is between the United States and China, we actually know very little as in the American public about China, and as a result, American public is very gullible to political manipulation, and especially China has always been, since the founding of this country, been the focus of a lot of partisan politics, power struggle. If the Democrats are in power, the Republicans use China to attack the Democrats for being weak. If the Republicans are in power, the Democrats use the China policy to attack the Republicans in power. So what I'm suggesting is that a lot of the tension and suspicion and misunderstanding between the United States and China really had nothing to do with what was going on in China or what China was doing to the United States. Mostly had to do with domestic politics and domestic racial politics, and Chinese American oftentimes are implicated in these partisan power struggle, and so we must put an end to this, the link between diplomacy and domestic racial politics. Chinese American rights and welfare should not be affected by whatever relationship we have in China. But unfortunately, as Chinese American, we know from history and for fact that we are constantly being impacted by whatever is going on, even though we are, we don't really participate in those activities, but we are always on the receiving end.
But nowadays the whole, even the profile of Chinese Americans has changed. So you have native-born Chinese Americans, second, third, fourth generation. You have Chinese from mainland China. you have Chinese and Taiwanese from Taiwan, and then you have ethnic Chinese from Southeast Asia. And so they are at very somewhat different places in terms of their political thinking, in terms of their perhaps maybe allegiances or the way they think about China and the U.S. and maybe even a third country, you know, depending on where they come from. So that makes it even more difficult, I think, to have a kind of a united sort of Chinese-American front in terms of U.S.-China relations.
Absolutely. I think that, since essentially, I think since 1970, the Chinese American community has become extremely fragmented, and that has something to do with the different waves of Chinese immigration to the United States. For instance, when Nixon went to China in 1972, with the Shanghai Communique acknowledging that Taiwan is part of China, then suddenly you have a wave of Taiwan Chinese immigrants coming into the United States because they feel that, there's no future in Taiwan anymore. And then when the United States was defeated in Vietnam, again, a large number of Vietnamese came, but even larger number in 1978 in the form of the so-called boat people. A vast number, and some people estimate as much as 40 to 60% of the boat people were actually ethnic Chinese, because of there's a considerable amount of ethnic cleansing that was going on in Vietnam, forcing Chinese who settled in Vietnam for centuries to leave Vietnam, Cambodia, and Laos for the United States. And of course, Latin America, also from Cuba to Peru to Central America, all those Chinese, because of the political unrest and because of different social and political revolutions, many of them are also coming to the United States. So Chinese American community is very fragmented. But I think as they settle down and the next generation emerge, I think there will be increasing Chinese American consciousness. And with the rise of China, I think even though we have nothing to do with the rise of China, the rise of China will have an impact on us. And America's interest in doing business in China have, I think, opened up opportunities for career advancement that Chinese America could never dreamed of before. So all these things have a profound impact, I think, on our life.
Yeah, especially for the young generation, they may be getting their MBAs or their degrees here, and they may choose to go to China or to work.
I personally know a lot of Chinese Americans who speak no Chinese whatsoever, but because they have good English and they know American business style and all that, so many of them actually have gotten really good job opportunities in China.
The preceding copyrighted program is a property of the University of California, Los Angeles. All rights reserved. It may be used freely for educational and not-for-profit activities. For other uses or to make an inquiry, please contact the Asian American Studies Center at UCLA.